The climate crisis has driven global leaders to take action. Over the years, countries around the world have come together to tackle climate change through a series of important international agreements. In this video, we'll explore the evolution of these agreements, starting with the Kyoto Protocol, moving to the Paris Agreement, and then to the global goal of net zero. We'll also discuss how countries and companies are working towards a low-carbon future. Our story begins in 1997 with the Kyoto Protocol, the first major international treaty addressing climate change. The Kyoto Protocol focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in developed countries, which had historically contributed most to global emissions. Under Kyoto, 37 industrialized nations and the European Community agreed to cut emissions by an average of 5% below 1990 levels over 5 years, from 2008 to 2012. However, Kyoto faced significant challenges. The United States initially signed but later withdrew, citing economic concerns and that it didn't impose emissions reductions on developing countries like China and India. Without full global participation, the impact was limited. While some countries met their targets, others fell short, and overall, global emissions continued to rise. By the early 2010s, it became clear that Kyoto alone couldn't address the escalating climate crisis. Scientists warned that global temperatures were rising faster than expected, with severe consequences. The world needed a new, more inclusive agreement involving both developed and developing countries to drive comprehensive climate action. These urgent concerns led to the landmark 2015 conference in Paris, where countries aimed to create an agreement that would involve all nations in combating climate change. The Paris Agreement was adopted in December 2015. Unlike Kyoto, Paris is legally binding and includes all countries, with each nation making its own climate commitments. The main goal of the Paris Agreement is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, with an aspirational target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Countries submit nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, which outline their plans for emissions reductions. Unlike Kyoto's fixed targets, the Paris Agreement allows countries to set their own goals, expecting that they'll update and strengthen these commitments every 5 years. This flexible, bottom-up approach was designed to be achievable for all nations. However, the agreement still faces challenges. Many countries are not on track to meet their NDC targets, and current commitments aren't enough to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why climate action at all levels is crucial to achieving these goals. A central concept emerging from the Paris Agreement is net zero. Net zero refers to the balance between the amount of greenhouse gas emissions produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. Achieving net zero means that any emissions are balanced by absorbing an equivalent amount from the atmosphere. This concept is crucial in the fight against climate change, as it aims to reduce the overall concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Various strategies such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, and carbon capture are employed to reach net zero targets. It's about reducing emissions as much as possible and offsetting the rest through carbon-absorbing measures. It's a massive undertaking, but critical for a sustainable future. Many countries have now set ambitious net zero targets. The European Union aims to become the first climate-neutral continent by 2050, while China has committed to achieving net zero by 2060. The United States, a top global emitter, has pledged to achieve net zero by 2050 as well, which includes major investments in renewable energy, green infrastructure, and advanced technologies across sectors. The US originally joined the Paris Agreement in 2015, under the Obama administration, pledging to reduce emissions as part of this global effort. However, in 2017, the Trump administration announced its withdrawal from the agreement, which was finalized in 2020. Shortly after taking office in 2021, President Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement, reaffirming the US commitment to climate action with a target to reduce emissions by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030. India, as a developing country with a fast-growing economy, has set a net zero target for 2070. Despite the unique challenges of balancing development and sustainability, India is making strides by expanding its solar and wind energy capacities, promoting electric mobility, and investing in sustainable practices. Each of these targets represents a commitment to a future with reduced emissions and a healthier environment. From green energy projects to carbon capture and reforestation initiatives, countries are taking action to meet their targets. While the path to net zero is demanding, these efforts are critical for a sustainable world. Companies are also critical players in the transition to net zero. Many large corporations have pledged to reach carbon neutrality or net zero within the next few decades. Tech giants like Microsoft and Google are investing in renewable energy, improving efficiency, and purchasing carbon offsets. Carbon credits, which fund projects that reduce or capture emissions, are also widely used by companies. However, achieving net zero often requires significant changes to supply chains, production methods, and business models. Despite these challenges, corporate net zero commitments represent a significant shift towards sustainable practices in the global effort to combat climate change. The journey towards net zero and the goals of the Paris Agreement represent some of the most ambitious climate commitments to date. By understanding these agreements and the roles of countries, companies, and individuals, we can work together for a more sustainable future. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll explore more ways to take climate action at both the individual and community levels. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you found this video insightful, and let us know in the comments what topics you'd like to learn about next.